Hello everyone. In the last lesson we installed a sample MySQL database and we started looking at the different queries that could be run on the data. In this lesson we'll bring together the PHP and MySQL languages and build a simple web application which is going to perform transactions on that same database. To build this application I reused my CRUD code template which I discussed in my other series on coding libraries. The link to that specific episode will be in the description. As you can see here, the template was fully functional and already had different sections to perform read or write operations on a database. From there, I modified the titles and the form fields to match with the employee database. In the first section, I have some basic statistics that I can pull from the database, such as latest hires or highest salaries. Notice that I added a loading animation while the data is being retrieved. Notice also that I fetch tables with different columns depending on the query. I can also clear each section to make room for the other ones. You might have noticed that the whole style is slightly different from the template. That is because I used Bootstrap to enhance the appearance, and this also allows the page to be responsive, meaning if we open it on a cell phone or if we shrink the page horizontally, we can see that the different fields automatically stack on top of each other. Here we have a form to fetch the data for a specific employee, let's say number 45,000. We can also add a new employee. This form has some validation. We know, for example, that there's already an employee number 45,000. So if we try adding another one, we get an error message. Let's check whether we have an employee number 500. We don't, so we can go ahead and add one with some dummy information. Now that we inserted the new employee, we can display his information. Let's say we want to make corrections on this new employee. We just enter the number here, and then the form automatically populates the current information. This makes it easier to modify specific parts, such as the first and last name. And then we can submit the changes by clicking on Edit. Again, this form will show us the updated information. Let's say we want to remove that test employee. We can do so in the last section by simply entering the number and then submitting the form. And now the employee has been deleted from the database. That sums up the functionalities of the application. Let's now go through what was modified or added in the code to go from the template to this final product. Ajax loader is our loading animation. All the queries are done asynchronously to avoid reloading the page, hence Ajax calls. The config file was modified to point to the employee database. The connection class didn't have to be modified because it reused the information from the config file. In the index, I included the Bootstrap CSS libraries and I added some custom styles. Then I modified the form itself. I put everything inside of Bootstrap containers and I used the Bootstrap form inline class so that the input fields would be side to side. The rest is pretty straightforward. It's similar to the HTML forms we've seen in some of the previous lessons. All the buttons call JavaScript functions, which we can see here. Our Ajax calls are targeted to the management folder, which, in the case of a select statement, builds an HTML table and then populates it with the result of the query. The queries themselves are located in the procedure call folder. We go through stored procedures for increased security as opposed to typing our queries in the PHP code. Let's see, for example, our select class. we can see that we're simply calling the procedure and then performing a fetch or a fetch all, depending whether we're expecting one or many records. Now let's take a look at the procedures themselves using PHP-MyAdmin. We're working with the employee database, and we have, for example, the get highest salaries procedure, which returns a list of the top 10 highest salaries. This one doesn't take in any parameters, but let's look at add employee, and we can see that all of the different pieces of information are received as parameters. If we go back to the insert class, we notice that our function receives all the same parameters and then passes them on to the stored procedure. We can also go back one more step to the management file, add employee. And here, of course, there's no HTML table because we're performing an insert rather than a select. All we need is some validation and some feedback, letting the user know whether the operation succeeded or not. The different values are passed using form post data, which is built manually since we're going through a JavaScript function rather than a post action straight from the form. We create a form data object, then we retrieve each value from the form and append them to the form data. Then the AJAX call is performed using the data as a parameter. Next, remember how the edit section was being populated automatically. This is the function that takes care of this after the employee number has been entered. We have an unblur property on the employee number, which means that when the focus goes away from this field, the function gets triggered. This was a very quick breakdown of the application. As always, links will be provided so that you can download and carefully go through the entire code. I've also created some scripts which can be run on the database in order to create all of the different stored procedures. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to leave a comment, and it will be my pleasure to clarify and possibly come up with other videos expounding on some of the subjects. Also remember, there's more to our sample database than an employee table. So if we wanted to go further, we could build a complex employee management application using the concepts of departments, salaries, and titles. Another way we could also improve our application is by making it more visual by adding graphics, for example, to show the number of employees per salary bracket or by age category. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next lesson.